Hey, this is John with Two Moose Home Inspections. Welcome to the January 2022 in-service training. First one of the year. Two Moose Home Inspections had a great 2021, and we expect 2022 to be even better. So hold on to your home inspection reports because we have a lot of really cool changes that are coming this year, and it's going to be a wild ride. So if this is your first time at one of our in-service trainings, we recommend watching it at 2x speed because there's a lot of information to cover, and we want to get through it as quickly as we possibly can. So let's jump right into it. The first thing is our end of year stats. We now have stats for every inspector, for any length of time, for any county, for any town, for any service that we offer, for how long it took to do the service, how many passes, fails, or what the metrics were. We have all that information right there at our fingertips, and it's been really cool to say that the inspectors have always felt that any time that they go to this location, the sewer scope always fails, meaning that there's always something wrong with the sewer line. And lo and behold, that's exactly what our data showed. And so now we have information that tells us how likely an area is to have a sewer scope that is going to fail, how likely we are to have high levels of radon, which, spoiler alert, it's everywhere because we're in a zone 1, so of course we have high levels of radon. But it's really interesting because we can also see what counties have the best water flow for their wells, what counties have the best water that have the least amount of issues as far as like hard water is concerned and other things like that. So some really, really powerful statistics. We're really, really excited about those. The next thing that we went through is there were a lot of recalls. So different companies have different recalls for different reasons. So we went over a couple of recalls. Also, we are going to be beta testing 2 new services. So this is going to be really cool. We're going to be doing virtual tours, and we're also going to be doing floor plans. And so what's really neat about this is that the virtual tours, we're already there taking 360 photos. And so then in post-production, will it take us a half hour? Will it take us an hour? How long is it going to take us to be able to create a virtual tour? And the time that I think this makes the most sense is not whenever you are buying the house, but whenever you're actually trying to sell your house. If you're doing a pre-listing inspection, then a virtual tour is one of those things that I really think is going to make a really, really big difference to those people that are selling their house. Because if we're already there taking the 360 photos and we only have to do an hour of post-production work, then, what is that worth? And of course, there's the cost of the software. There's the time associated with it, the cost of hosting the tours or the images. And we're figuring all that stuff out to try to get everybody the most competitive price that we can. In addition to that, we will also be doing floor plans. And so again, this is probably mostly geared towards people that are doing pre-listing inspections, but we can go through the entire house and have a 2D printed floor plan that says that this room is 12 by 15, the ceilings are 8 foot high, so on and so forth, all the way through the entire house, and have a really nice floor plan. So whenever you sell your house, you can show exactly what it is, or whenever you're buying a house, maybe you want to have that floor plan so you know what kind of furniture you would want to put in there. So those are 2 things that we're starting beta testing. I don't know how soon we'll be able to roll it out. I'm hoping that come the middle of February, we will actually start having that service available for pay. But right now we are just starting beta testing, and we are all very, very, very excited about it. So let's jump into a few issues that we have going on. So in-floor radiant heat systems. Normally what you would see a really nice path where across the entire floor, spaced 12 inches apart, you're going to see that piping all the way through the floor. And sometimes you don't. And so in this particular house, the piping was just very all over the place. There was no real consistency. And so that could be because it was poorly installed. That could be because that's the way it was meant to be installed. But it's just important that if you're buying a house that that I'm not going to have really nice uniform heated floors, and that's okay. And so sometimes what will happen is that depending on where the area is, let's say you're in a condo, let's say you're in a townhouse, you might have heat coming from both sides where there might be a building on either side, or you could be in a condo and there could be heat above and below you. And so if you run a whole bunch of pipe through there, as soon as that pipe heats up, it then creates an overheat condition where there's just too much heat being produced for that particular space. And so is this appropriate? Yeah, it's probably appropriate. But the thing is that if you're walking across the floor and you say, wow, there's a cold spot here, I think something's wrong. Well, it's good to know that no, there's not anything wrong, but it's also a good idea to just say, hey, builder, can I have a question for you? Yeah, why is it that you did it this way? Why is it that there's this inconsistency across the floor? And so, like, if you look at this one that's right above me here, it's like, why does it look like that? Why doesn't it look different? And why did they install it the way they did? And is it as efficient as it possibly could? Meh, who knows? Does it matter? No, I mean, not really. The entire space was really, really warm. And so it did exactly what it was supposed to do. But it's just one of those things that kind of like make you scratch your head and say, wonder why it was that way. That's just a weird thing. So as we move down, we have a downspout that's going out onto the shingles. The problem with the downspout going out onto the shingles is that you have all this turbulent water coming across the side of the shingles. And two things. One is shingles are designed in such a way that the water hits the top shingle, rolls down onto the next shingle. And so whenever you have water that's coming across, what's happening is it can go underneath the shingle. And if it goes underneath the shingle, that's obviously bad. So then, okay, John, can I just turn it, 90 degrees and just have it going down the slope? Well, again, no. And the reason why is because there's a velocity that happens with that water. If there's any kind of already like granules from the roof above, then all of that can work as like a sandpaper and it can erode away the shingles that you currently have on the house. And so in general terms, you want that downspout to go to the next set of gutters and go from there. And in our area, you definitely want to see heat tape coming out of these gutters. Otherwise, that freeze thaw is going to expand and it's going to completely damage these gutters. So this one's kind of interesting. I don't know what I would do. I don't know if I would do anything, but the railing height is not the right railing height. And so what do I mean by this? Well, 34 to 38 inches is what it's supposed to be. And this one's right at 25 inches. And so if we take a look at this, where we're saying that the issue is basically right at the downward slope. So at the downward slope, as you're coming down the main set of stairs, it's just not high enough. Now, is somebody going to lean over the railing and fall off? The answer is no. Nobody's probably going to do that. And does it matter? No. Do you need to change it? No. But it's one of those safety things that if it's predictable, it's preventable. And is it predictable that one kid may be, playing around with another kid and they lean over the railing and they just go too far and they fall down? Yeah, totally possible. But kids are bouncy, like they can fall, they can take the hit. Their bones aren't, brittle like ours. So maybe they'll be fine. But again, if it's predictable, it's preventable. So just something to be aware of. All right, so this one was a toilet that was leaking, and this particular toilet, I was so thankful that this toilet was leaking from the storage tank for all the water, the tank right there. And the reason it's good that it's leaking from there is because since it was leaking from there, all of that is clean water. Now, can you still have mold? Yes, you can still have mold. Can you still have damage to the subfloor? Yes. Can you still have damage to other components in the house? Most definitely. But the main thing is that whenever you see water that is around the base of a toilet, if you have water around the base of the toilet, then if that water is the gray water, or in this case, it is the sewage, it is the water that has already had what you had to give the toilet in it, then what will happen is that you then have a biological hazard where the subfloor is now saturated with a liquid that is not safe to be around. And so anytime that you have human waste and it's saturated into the building materials of the house, you really do have to cut out that entire area and then put in new stuff. So it was actually a really, really good thing that we just had a bad gasket. And having a bad gasket, that takes time and it takes effort to make that better. But man, I'll tell you, this is such a better outcome than if we actually had a leak coming from the underside. So really, really cool. But again, it's just important to know that if something is leaking, we need to stop it because mold is always an underlying issue. Now, when we talk about mold being an underlying issue, and we take a look at this, you probably have a situation like this in your own shower. And so in the shower, if you take a look at that top ring where it meets the wall, so where it meets the wall right over here, if you take a look at that, if I was water, I could drip down behind that and there's a hole cut out through the wall that goes to where the plumbing is. And so what happens is that if I'm water, I'm going to drip down and then I'm going to go into the materials that are not waterproofed. And if that's the case, that entire wall can then just have high levels of humidity, high levels of moisture, basically. So high levels of humidity will then lead to mold growing. And the thing is, people are like, John, do you do mold inspections? And the answer is no, we don't do mold inspections. And why not? Because I know that every single house has mold. I know that there is a higher amount of humidity at the tops of vaulted ceilings than there is at the base. I know that there's more than likely not proper circulation of air through the attic space. I know that the percentage of ventilation in the attic space versus the square footage of the attic space, or actually the cubic footage of that attic space, is not adequate in 99% of all homes. I know that people take showers that are too long. I know people have accidents that they think that they've cleaned up. And the fact of the matter is that every house has some amount of mold in it. It's just that my concern is, has the mold expanded? Is it still expanding? Is it in the Goldilocks zone? If there's too much water, then basically there's not going to be any mold. If there's too little water, then the mold cannot grow. And if there's just that Goldilocks level, then that mold is going to start producing spores. It's going to be replicating. It's going to be doing its thing. So the reason I don't do mold inspections is because I'll just tell you right now, your house has mold. I'll tell you that right now behind this wall, if you were to pull out this drywall, there's going to be little trace amounts of mold. Now, does it matter? No, because if you cut off the ability for there to be water in there, then you don't have to worry about any of the mold, because the mold is then going to go into a dormant state and it's not going to be producing spores. And then in general terms, you're fine. Now, if you have really severe allergies, then of course you might be affected differently. However, what I'm saying is that almost every single house has mold. So what we search for are ways in which mold can get into your house and start to grow in that Goldilocks zone. And this right here is a great way for there to be Goldilocks zone growth of mold. And so what are we going to do? We're going to take caulking and we are going to make a semicircle. So we don't want to caulk the bottom. And the reason why is because if water does get in there, I don't want to caulk all the way around and now I've created a bucket that fills up with water. I want there to be an opening at the bottom where the water can come out. And that way, if there is high levels of moisture, if there's water that gets back there, it has a way to get out. So that's something I need to fix. And then if you take a look right here, again, if you just put that little half circle of caulking right around there, well, probably more like 75% of a circle, 3/4 circle, then that right there is going to prevent any issues that we have with moisture getting back behind that space. Now, again, what's the likelihood that there's mold back there? I don't know. But the thing is, depending on how much this house is used, depending on how much water gets dripped back there, there's a good chance that there could be a little bit of mold. And again, like everybody's so scared of the M word. Is that big of a deal? Not really, because I can pretty much tell you that every house has mold in it. Does it have mold in the carpeting? Does it have mold up in the attic? Does it have mold behind the shower? Does it have mold in the crawl space? I mean, almost every house is going to have some amount of mold. And what we really want to do is we want to find where's the moisture coming from and how do we stop it? That's what I'm interested in. Sorry for the rant. This should have been an easy thing. Put some caulking around it. It's never easy with me, right? So next thing, glass at risk. So in this particular shower, if you open up the door, it's just going to hit right into the shower head. And so this door, even though it is designed to go in both directions, can really only go in one direction. If you were Airbnb-ing or VRBOing this particular house, then what will happen is that you're going to open that up. It could hit that shower head, and then that would be the end of that. So if you are going to rent a house, if it's your own personal house, then I always pull the shower door open. But if you're not, you might have a guest that doesn't know and they push it in, and then that's the end of that door. So next thing, trash on the roof. This house was awesome. This house was so super cool. It was a phenomenal house, but they had trash up on the roof. So a roofing company, everybody's like, well, I had a professional roofer do it, so it's got to be good. That's not the case. Man, I'll tell you, like, I rarely ever see roofs installed 100% correctly. There's always seems to be something that they mess up. But this is a thing that is just so easy to repair. Whenever you, as a project foreman, whenever you are the one that is in charge of that project, you should be able to say, hey, we are going to do a final walk and we're going to make sure that we've picked up everything that needs picked up. And so on this roof, there's just, half-cut pieces of shingles, all over the place. And is that a problem? Yes and no. So no, it's not really that big of a problem, but it's like whenever that blows off of the roof, then somebody's going to be like, oh my gosh, my roof is failing. I have shingles blowing off. No, that's just trash blowing off. And so then they paid all this money to have somebody inspect their roof, and the inspector just says, oh, there's trash on your roof. Your shingles are fine. But they spent all this money on it. So just as a builder, you really should remove all the trash. You should make it beautiful. Same as like pack out what you pack in. No trace left behind. Whatever. Like same thing as if you're a hiker. So as we move on, foreign debris and panels, basically what we called it. But there's some cardboard in there. So the problem with this cardboard is that if there was any arcing, let's say that something wasn't properly torqued down. Because it's not properly torqued down, then the electricity might be doing these micro arcs where it's supposed to, but it can heat up several inches of the electrical wires, which wouldn't even necessarily be enough to melt the sheathing of the wires, but it would be enough that it could catch that cardboard on fire, because we're talking, maybe 300-400 degrees before it would trip a circuit breaker potentially. And so that's enough to catch cardboard on fire. I think like anything above 200 is plenty. And so really what we want to make sure is that there's nothing that is able to catch on fire, and that if you have any holes that are inside of your service panel, that those holes have some kind of metal covering them, because we just don't want anything that could catch on fire to be able to catch on fire. So next thing, TPRV drainage inadequate. So the temperature pressure relief valve is perfect. It's 6 inches off the ground. Everything is great. Well, there's the problem. So what happened was they didn't slope the concrete in the direction that it needed to slope to be able to get to this floor drain. And that's okay, like that happens. And so then what are we going to do? Well, if you already look down here, there is another temperature pressure relief or condensate drain that is coming through and is going right to that hole. So what you can do is the exact same thing, and you can just extend that pipe just a little bit further to get it to the point that if there was an issue, it doesn't rot out and cause a mold issue behind that wall, which is what it's currently doing. And so then the second thing would be is this a condensation drip line, or is this right here a temperature pressure relief valve? And in this case, it's a temperature pressure relief valve. So the next part of this issue was, why is it leaking? Because it's not supposed to be. So as we move down, we then talk a little bit about radon. All right, so here we go. Radon, minimum of 1.4, average of 2.9, maximum of 5.1. Okay, so it is below 4 picocuries per liter, which means we don't have to do anything. Okay, cool. Yeah, so for this real estate transaction, there's no obligation for the seller to do anything to repair this 2.9 picocuries per liter because it is below the 4 picocuries per liter, which is what the EPA sets as the guideline. Now, the thing is, if I'm the homeowner and I have a young child, because their lungs are developing so fast, there's so much cellular division that if any radon came in there, shot off an alpha particle, damaged some DNA in one of my child's cells, then they could develop a lung ailment that will affect them for the rest of their lives. Lung cancer is second only to smoking tobacco. Radon is the #2 cause of lung cancer in the world. And so anyway, would I get a radon mitigation system at 2.9? Oh, yes. Definitely. Now, I know I can't get the seller to do it, but listen, I'm buying a house. If I can't afford $2,000 for a radon mitigation system, then maybe I need to buy a slightly smaller house. But $2,000 is not that much to ask, ballpark, obviously, for a radon system. Because again, we're hitting a maximum of 5.1. So then the questions you have to ask yourself is, are the numbers going to be higher or lower in the wintertime? Are they going to be higher or lower in the summertime? Are they going to be higher or lower during a precipitation event? Are they going to be higher or lower whenever it's dry? And so it's important to understand that radon is constantly fluctuating depending on the weather and like even the barometric pressure that's outside and the season. And so it's just important to know that if you're at a 2.9, heck, if you're anything above a 2, I personally would pay for, I'm going to pay for yours, but if it was my house, I would pay to have it done. So then the next thing is, this one right here, 15.2. And so this 15.2 with an average of 10. All right, so we have 10 picocuries per liter. So yeah, most definitely. And then people are like, oh my gosh, it's 10, it can only be 4. As soon as you have a radon mitigation system installed, then what will happen is that right then and there, you're going to be at the right level. Everything's going to be A-okay. You aren't going to have anything to worry about because whether you have a 10 or in this next one, a 20, look at this. This right here is a 21.7 with a maximum of 28.5. Now, that's not the highest number that we've gotten, but in Summit County, or actually, I mean, really anywhere in the Rocky Mountains, we are in a zone 1. We have the highest levels of radon of anywhere else in the country. And so, of course, we're going to have high levels of radon whenever we do our tests. And these are pretty high. But whether you have a 28, whether you have a 4, it makes no difference. As soon as you put in that radon mitigation system, it's going to get you down to hopefully a 2 or less. And the way that works is it just says, hey, radon, come over here. Let's go through this pipe. We're going to go outside this house. You don't need to bother these people. And that's exactly what happens. And it works really, really well. So if you take a look here, this one right here is Governor Polis, and he is talking about how half of Colorado homes may have dangerous radon levels and encouraging testing. So basically, January is our Radon Action Month. And so if you were unaware of that, this January was Radon Action Month. But let me just tell you something. With something that causes lung cancer second only to smoking tobacco, I think every month should be Radon Action Month. And the fact of the matter is, as a home inspector, I'm advocating that you always get stuff radon tested. And in fact, you're supposed to have everything radon tested once every 5 years. If you have a radon mitigation system, test it once every 5 years. If you don't have a radon mitigation system, test once every 5 years because you have no idea because it's colorless, odorless. It does not, like you can't tell what's happening, but it is a radioactive gas in your house and you're breathing in that radioactive material. A lot of it, like a lot of it. Look, at some point, look into a picocurie and see exactly how many billion alpha particles are being released in a 1 hour period. It's like mind blowing. And so anyway, long story short, January is Radon Action Month, and I just figured that, these were just 3 tests that I just pulled from this, from the month that we just had, and I just figured it's just one of those things you should know. So basically, The lowest that we had is 5.0 picocuries per liter. The average that we have in Summit County is 7.2. Now that 7.2 average, yes, it's above the 4.0 picocuries per liter. That's the EPA action level. But that 7.2, whenever we test a home that has a radon system that is working properly, and whenever we're testing a home that doesn't have a radon system, all of that goes into the average. And so some of these homes are 1 or less. And if you see, the lowest that we've ever had was a 0.5 picocuries per liter. That is in homes that have radon mitigation systems. And so the fact that that's the lowest number that we've ever had means that radon is everywhere. And so 7.2, although that is an average, that is an average of every single house that we've ever performed this test on in all of Summit County, Park County, Lake County, Grand County, Clear Creek County. All of those counties, 7.2 is the average, and that includes homes that do have a mitigation system and homes that don't. And so the actual number of homes that don't have a mitigation system is astronomically higher. So, but we don't track whether it has a mitigation system or not. We just track high or not. Anyway, the maximum that we've had is a 42.4 picocuries per liter, and that is ridiculous. So, incomplete construction. Why does this matter? It doesn't. We're just letting you know that the construction is incomplete. The fact of the matter is you may want to change everything about this property, and that's perfectly acceptable. But if you're buying the house, and you might be buying it sight unseen, it's just important that you know that, hey, there is still construction that is going on, or it's not necessarily move-in ready or renter ready or whatever it may be. And so just throwing that out there for you. All right, yellowed smoke detector present. So the smoke detector's color was yellow. Again, if smoke detectors are 10 years old or older, you got to replace them. You should be testing them annually. And if they are yellow, like this one here is, then what that means is that it is past its design life. The polymers and the plastics have faded by design, and letting you know with it being ugly and yellow, it's time to replace it. All right, cracked glass present. So this particular window has some cracked glass. And the thing is that that's going to be a little expensive. That is a specialty custom piece. However, you can tell with the sash that you should be able to have them replace it without having to replace everything. So it's totally doable. And so whenever you have large windows like this, it can be kind of scary. Now imagine this. So there's no obligation for these glass panes to be tempered glass. If you're unfamiliar, normal glass, whenever it breaks into sheets of glass. And then whenever you have tempered glass, it breaks into little small pieces, and it's a lot safer. Now, if you had a child that threw a baseball and it hit this window, and a large sheet of glass came falling out, and it were to cut you, that would be bad. You would have a bad time. If it was tempered glass and a baseball goes through this window, then you would just be rained on by a bunch of little pieces of glass that are designed to break in a way that it will not hurt you the same way that that these large sheets of glass will. So would you replace this with tempered glass? Meh. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, realistically, there's no obligation for you to do so, but if you wanted to, that would be cool. The only problem that you'll find with this with tempered glass is that anytime that you have that rounded section along the top, that's going to be a lot more costly and expensive. I just figured that you can already see that these are big, like, panes that are, the way that it's cracking is like a big pane, and I just wanted you to see that if this were to crack all the way through, then you could see falling from, 8 feet tall would be a large pane of glass. Ugh, yikes. So, limited inspection for the service panel. All right, what do you mean? Well, the service panel is hidden behind all of this junk right here. I don't know if you can see like the bottom corner of the service panel right there, but it is hidden behind all this junk. So are we going to inspect the service panel? Nope, there's no way. We are not going to be able to pull out that entire shelf that has all this stuff on it. We aren't going to then be able to open it up, look inside the service panel, so on and so forth. So should the seller have cleared that out? Yeah, definitely. But the other thing is, imagine that there was an electrical fire inside that house. Could they shut off all of the circuits? Could they save their house from burning down if they knew it was an electrical fire? If they saw an outlet that was catching on fire, do you think that they could get into their garage, open that up, and turn off all the circuits to save their house from an electrical fire, or no? I don't know, something to think about. If it's your home, your family, your pets, your safety, you should know exactly where this electrical panel is, and you should be able to access it without any kind of issue. All right, tree damage from rubbing. So basically, anytime that a tree is near a house, that's bad. And so in this particular case, it's rubbing. Now, if you remember our wildfire video series that we had, that means that if this tree catches on fire, you better believe that this house is going to catch on fire. Not only that, as the wind is blowing, the tree is damaging all the shingles, it's damaging the paint, it's damaging everything. And whenever the tree decides to die and fall over, then what it's going to do is it's going to damage the house. Oh, and what about the roots? What are the roots doing? A lot of damage. So anyway, Moving on. GFCI did not trip. So anytime that you see a ground fault circuit interrupter, it should trip. If you've watched our GFCI videos, then you know that whenever you touch something, if the electricity goes through you instead of completing the circuit, that's bad. That means that you're getting shocked. If you continue getting shocked, you will have been electrocuted, which means that you're dead. So you want to make sure your GFCIs are working. They have a little test button right there on the GFCI. Really, really easy to test it out. This one does not work. If you have yourself $15, you can probably put a new one in. If you know how to do it. Otherwise, hire an electrician, maybe $100 and they'll put one in for you. So just something to be mindful of, because I don't want you to have a false sense of security that you have a GFCI whenever you don't actually have a GFCI. So anytime that you're around water or some way that you could potentially come in contact with an electrical conductor, then a GFCI is like a must-have. All right, so back to trees. Trees too close to foundation. Whenever we take a look at this tree, yeah, the tree is way too close to the foundation. What I don't understand is why this tree has had the opportunity to thrive in this space. So that tree is what, maybe 10 years old? Maybe 8 years old? And so the problem is that, well, we'll cut it down whenever it becomes a nuisance. Okay, I love your thought process here. It's a cute tree. I get to see it out the window. It's my Charlie Brown Christmas tree. It's wonderful. However, is it rubbing up against the window? Yes, sure, it's rubbing up against the window. But the next thing is that the roots are going down and they are trying to find their own way through this world. And one of the things that they will find is your foundation. And they will push up against your foundation. They'll find every little crack. They'll expand those cracks. They will remove the soil from around your foundation. They will invite water in to help give nutrients to the tree. And they will separate soils and then allow them to come back whenever water comes in. And they'll separate soils and allow it to come back. And then they're going to completely undermine your house's foundation, and then you're going to cut it down whenever it's a nuisance. It is a nuisance right now. You should never have a tree this close to a house. Never, ever should you have a tree this close to the house. So just get rid of it. Just get rid of it before the kids get attached. Because once the kids get attached, you won't be able to get rid of this tree for 18 years. And then whenever you do, they're going to come home from college and they're going to be mad at you. So get rid of the tree now. That's all I got to say. All right, safety eyes not present. So on a garage door, not only should the garage door come down, and if there's something in its way, it should be able to retract. But if somebody runs through it, whether it be a dog, a cat, a child, anything, then there should be a photoelectric eye that is basically connected. And so whenever something crosses the path of these two, we'll just call them lasers because that's just easiest. So whenever or a camera actually, whenever it passes in front of this camera, basically, then it'll tell the garage door to go back up. It is a standard safety practice. It's been around for 15 years. The fact that it doesn't have it, that's just laziness on the installation, because some people say, I don't need that. But the thing is, you're going to sell your house just like this person did. And now you do need it because it's a safety thing. Now, do you need it? No, you don't need it. Is the seller obligated to put it in? No, the seller isn't obligated to put it in, but just put it in. It's a really good safety thing. And this particular garage door was designed to have safety eyes. So then I would actually just ask the seller, what did you do with them? Why didn't you just plug in these low voltage wires and just set them there? Oh, I didn't want to set it up. Okay, just get them installed. Trust me, it's worth the safety. All right, so egress inadequate. So basically, whenever you have a bedroom, you need to be able to exit that bedroom to safely be able to get out of there. And so this particular window, I don't know if you can tell or not, but this window will no longer allow anybody to exit the room. So if there's a house fire, unless your kid is the Kool-Aid man, nobody is going to bust through this wall because this is now all the exterior siding of that house. And so they basically just covered over that window with siding, and that's just silly is what that is. So anyway, is this a bedroom now? Nope, no longer is this considered a bedroom because you have no egress. And because there is no egress, legally, it cannot be a bedroom. So anyway, long story short on this one is you either have to cut that out to be able to have that window have a way of being able to escape from that bedroom, or you can't call it a bedroom anymore and people should not be sleeping in it. So then if we take a look at this ceiling, what you can see is there's all these blue sections. Is that water? Oh my gosh, it's blue. Is it water? No, it's not water. It is cold sections. And so the reason that this is the way it is because your insulation is going to compress. As insulation compresses, it's not going to be as warm. Think about a big puffy jacket that you have. Whenever you first get that jacket, it's just so big and puffy and warm. But as the padding gets squished down, the jacket's no longer as warm as it used to be. And the same thing happens to houses over time. You can see that as the padding has slid down, it's kind of squished down at the bottoms there. Maybe it was packed in really tightly, or it is just over time just squished. And so all this is saying is that, hey, just so you know, from an energy perspective, your house isn't as energy efficient as it can, and that's referred to as R value loss, which is an R value loss over time. So next thing is TPR discharge valve missing. Again, we've talked about this many, many times. Don't put a pipe that can't handle 150 PSI and 210 degrees Fahrenheit, because it's just going to go around like a garden hose, just spraying everybody with 210 degree Fahrenheit water at 150 PSI. You will go to the hospital with burns. And so this should have a solid rigid pipe that goes all the way down to 6 inches above the ground. Technically, it should go into a drip pan that should then take it over to a proper floor drain, but you know, so rarely does that ever happen. All right, water seepage through walls. Now, here's an interesting thing. Should a foundation be seeping water? The answer is no. But sometimes foundations do seep water, and that can be normal for that foundation. Is it ideal? No. But there are plenty of houses that during spring runoff season, you have so much water and there's such hydraulic force pushing that it comes through that wall. If you were to stop that water, then it could actually push the foundation. Now, should water ever go into the crawl space, into the foundation, seep through the walls? The answer is no, that should never ever happen. However, whenever you have a house that was built in the 1970s and it has no signs of foundational movement over the last 50 years, maybe it's not that bad of a thing. However, technically it should never happen, but it's been happening for the last 50 years. So, you know, who cares? Well, one other thing is if you look at the white vapor barrier, do you see all those water droplets that are on the vapor barrier? That's not great. And if you take a look on the pipe over there, and you see all those water droplets on the pipe, that's also not great. But remember, we talked about that Goldilocks zone for mold. So either you have too much water or you have too little water. Right now, that's too much water. However, if the wood for your floor joist is above, I forget what the number is. I want to say 25% off the top of my head, but I can't really remember. But anyway, let's say it's 25% of moisture in that wood. If it's above that level, then it can start rotting. And if the wood starts to rot, then of course that's a problem. And so you want to keep the humidity levels down. So what would I do in here? I would just get a vent to vent that area. So I would have somebody properly insulate and put in a proper vapor barrier, which this is not a proper vapor barrier. There are too many holes, but I would have somebody insulate the floor, put in a proper vapor barrier, and insulate my pipes and insulate all that stuff. Proper vapor barrier, and then have an exhaust fan that just takes all the air out of this space. So that way we can find an equilibrium that much faster. That's probably what I'd want to do. Now, the concern with that is that then we're introducing cold air. If we're introducing cold air, then our pipes could freeze. So we want to make sure that we are doing the proper things to make sure that's okay. Because again, what do you think is in this damp soil? Mold. Mold is growing in this damp soil. I can pretty much guarantee it. But again, this has been happening for the last 50 years. Is it normal? It's normal for this house. It's normal for a lot of houses. It's just not ideal. But it is what it is. And would I not buy a house because of this? No, probably not. Is it something that I like? No, I don't like it. But understanding the seasons of the house and understanding the way the house is operated and whatever, if this was brand new construction, I'd have a serious problem. If this is 50 years old and it's tried and true and it's proven that it works, I'm good. I'm all for it. So anyway, moving on to the next thing, an active leak. So this active leak is actually coming from the condensate pipe. And so the condensate is coming out of this high efficiency boiler, and then it is coming down and it is dripping onto the floor because there's a small leak. Take a look at the floor and you can see that the concrete has been etched away. Now, the thing about high efficiency boilers is that the water that comes out of a high efficiency boiler is not something you want to drink. It's very acidic. And so what you need is a pH neutralizer. A pH neutralizer you can buy on Amazon for like 30 bucks. No big deal. You could install it yourself. It's a super simple kit and you replace it once a year. It's just a bunch of like little pebble looking things and the water goes through that. It goes from being acidic down to being basically more alkaline. And so then what you have is that right here, because that has been dripping, it has acid etched the concrete. That's how much acid there is. So we really want to make sure that there is not only a pH neutralizer installed, but we also want to make sure that that leak stops and that the water goes properly where it's supposed to go. Now, that pH neutralizer will help to make sure that the pipes are not being corroded, that your septic or sewage pipe is not being corroded, and that whenever it gets to either the water treatment plant or your septic tank, that it's able to be managed appropriately before it's released back into the environment. And so having that pH neutralizer is a really, really big deal. So just something to be mindful of. All right, this deck, multiple deck deficiencies, that is that's a nice way of putting it. This deck had pretty much everything wrong with it that you could have wrong with a deck. One of the things that came up that's kind of not new, it's a very well-known thing, but basically there's a part of this called a throat, and basically the throat is like right here, and let me actually go right about here. So the throat is from this corner to this edge right here. And so this right here is the throat. And this space here needs to be larger. All right. This space for what this is too narrow. And so if we take a look here, it's saying that for what we had, the throat should be probably another 2 inches thicker. So the throat depth should be 5 3/4 inches is what it should be. And so this particular set of stairs had a lot of issues, and you can see the wood is separating from those stringers, and the whole thing is just falling apart. But it just goes to show that just because somebody puts in a stringer or makes a deck or whatever, doesn't mean that they've done it correctly. And in this case, they haven't, and that stringer has the ability to flex and will eventually completely fail, even though technically it kind of already has. But it's just a thing that whenever you look at stuff, it's like, wow, I haven't seen one of these in, a month, in 2 months, in 3 months. And I just kind of figured that I would bring it up just as a point of conversation about that whole like throat depth. So next thing, baseboard heat too hot. You better believe it is. So the floor and the cabinetry have both almost caught on fire. There's actually parts of the cabinet that are missing because it has gotten so hot. This thing will catch the house on fire and kill everybody. And so I would really, really, really recommend not ever using this or having it replaced immediately. It is just not a good thing. And so that can happen whenever its thermal regulator that tells it to shut off is no longer working. So it just produces heat and produces heat and produces heat and never has any idea that it has produced too much heat. So that pretty much wraps up everything. I think this one was a pretty short in-service training. We had a lot of effort going into getting ready for the beta test for a lot of our new services. And so I think in general, this was a pretty short and easy in-service training. If you guys have any questions about anything that was listed in our in-service training, please reach out to us. If you want any additional information, you can check out our blog, you can check out our website, you can check out our other YouTube videos. If you watched this far, why? That's impressive. I'm very surprised by that. But congratulations on making it all the way through here. That 2x speed must have really helped you out. So if you have any additional questions or if you'd like to schedule a home inspection, please visit 2moosehomeinspections.com. Have a wonderful day.